Hey, kia ora koutou. Welcome to another edition of Big Hairy News. Kia ora Chewy, sir. How are you?
Kia ora, Pat. I am good.
I got outside today. Terrible weather through the country. It's pretty bad down here in Dunedin. I got outside today, and even though the sun was out, I basically took my dog for a swim at the park because just how much water was on the ground and saturated by the end of the chasing the ball. So
I see what you've done there.
You see what I've done there? Went for a swim at the park. I know it didn't make much sense because there could have been a pool at the park, but there wasn't. I went for a swim on the rugby field. So, Karen.
I have been bombarded by photos from our dog walker of our dog away on her pack walk looking very sad all week because she's been made to leave her double bed at the front of the room, front of the house, to go for a walk in a forestry block in the rain. We're terrible people.
Yeah, mine's the opposite. Mine would be up there, hadn't had a run for a day and a half. And it's like, we were there for 35 minutes. And I was like, we're done. And dog was like, no, we're good. We'll keep going, please. Keep going, please. No, we're done. So, thank you for joining us, team. Looking forward to an interesting show tonight. We are talking about, I'm calling it the new testing regime at schools. We'll talk more about that with the president of NZI, Mark Potter, in a second. We're also going to be having a chat about this Kainga Ora clean out. Now, I'm fascinated by this because there was some audio actually from an RNZ show yesterday, Chewy, where the new chair says things completely the opposite to the Prime Minister. And then he very quickly backtracks to say, well, he's not disagreeing with the Prime Minister, even though what he says is exactly the opposite of what the Prime Minister's been saying for the past 6 months. So we'll give you a bit of a picture around that as well and what it actually means for Kainga Ora and New Zealand and the fact that they're stopping building houses. So, you know, what did Labor do? 12,000 in that last term, more than the 1950s. And everyone's saying, oh, what about your 16,000 you promised? Well, they got to 12 and there was 4 due this year, which I guess you could have said they put through. And this government's come in and said, nah, we're not building houses anymore. We're going to focus on being landlords. So, you know, we'll see how that pans out. And also, there was an interesting conversation on the working group last night. They were talking around about the media and the government coming on board, the national government coming on board. And even though, it's kind of funny, even though like pre-election, they were very anti-Willie Jackson's proposal for digital funding for the media, they've taken on board his policy almost to the letter and they're trying to pass it now. So it's funny how that happens. They must have misread it last time and realized that actually they do like it. And they were just made a mistake as to how shite they thought it was prior to the election. Want to say a big thanks to all of our patrons, lovely, lovely people. Been a few people sign up this week. We'll redo the graphics, the credits this weekend. So if you have become a patron this week, you'll be in the credits from next week onwards. Patreon.com/Big Hairy News. And this is not really a Patreon thing, but just remember we've also offered people. Now, I realize, Chewy, the offer we made last night, which is up to $500, is a bit harder than us just throwing it out there because we kind of need to have a criteria. So you follow me on Twitter or follow the Facebook page, and over the next few days, we'll think up what the criteria is. Like, if we're going to use it for our credits, it kind of needs to be about 3 minutes. And obviously has something to do with the work we do. And we really want it to be catchy so it can get in people's heads and annoy them after a couple of hours, like the current one does, the AI-generated one does. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, we're offering $500 to someone to write us a theme song. And the reason we're doing it is last night we were talking about how AI is kind of impacting the artistic world. And then we realized we have an AI theme tune. So we're going to put our money where our mouths are and say, artists out there, you want $500? We'll pay you $500 to write our theme tune. That's sort of what we're doing. So we're kind of sort of trying to support people and, yeah, That makes sense, hey, Joey. So stay with us over the next couple of days and through the weekend. Really good place to do is follow us on Facebook, because I think on Facebook is a place that it will probably put all the information up there and stuff. Anyway, is that it, Chewy? Is there anything else you want to?
I think that covers housekeeping.
Housekeeping's done.
Yes.
All right. Let's welcome to the show President of the NZDI, Mark Potter. Mark, good evening and welcome to the show.
Tēnā kōrua.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate you giving us some time, because there's been this announcement by the government today, and whilst we can talk about things like phonics and kind of a layman's understanding of it, it's much better for us to bring on someone with more knowledge to A, explain to us what they're saying, and B, talk to us about maybe what the response is. I know it's only day one, and so you probably only just started to scratch the surface, but as representative of part of the teaching community, we hope you have a bit of a feel for it, so you can let us know what they, like when the 2010 national government was in and they brought in national standards, I know NZDI was like, guys, this is not going to go well. And we kind of saw that 14 or 15 years later when the current national government managed to blame the Labour government for the performance of 15-year-olds, which seems to be a follow-on from, anyway. So yeah, we're keen to have you on board to have a bit of a chat about it. I think what we'll do to start with is we'll actually watch the clip from One News together, and that'll bring everyone up to date who's not up to date, and then we can talk from there on in. So the Golden Fox, Simon Dowler, was talking about student evaluations, and we'll check this out and then come back in 90 seconds, 2 minutes or so.
The majority of students will be evaluated using two familiar types of tests, and a move the Education Minister says will go some way to improving achievement. But as senior political reporter Benedict Collins explains, some say the government's focus should be elsewhere.
Kids at Silverstream School braving the cold.
Just quietly, TVNZ, when people from Dunedin hear about a suburb just north of Auckland City braving the cold and they're dressed like that, you just read the room, guys. Read the room.
And welcoming the Prime Minister.
How are we?
Good morning, Mr. Luxon.
Good morning.
And education was on the cards.
My name is. My sound is.
From 2025, all children in their first year of schooling will participate in two very simple phonics checks. But crucially, this will help teachers to identify those learners who may need a little bit of extra help.
For years 3 to 8, most children will have to have their reading, writing and maths assessed through learning tools called EASTL and progressive achievement tests.
And to have a world-leading education system, we need everyone on board.
90% of schools already are.
There is quite a big uptake already, but what we know from ERO is that it's not consistent across the country.
The tools help show where kids are at.
What's really important is that we don't set tests that kids pass or fail, but we set tests that give us important information about what we need to teach next.
It's part of the government's plan to have 80% of students up to speed on reading, writing and maths before...
Oh, careful, Mr. Luxon. Remember the last time we did this, K is for cat. Just got to say, we're just putting it out there to be careful, sir. Don't get caught out in that. You see, it was a gotcha question by those children last time. K is for cat.
Or high school by 2030. But some aren't convinced.
One of the things that I think is important to note is that in countries which have introduced things like phonics tests or even national testing, there's not been a correlation in improvement in terms of outcomes.
She questions whether it's really where the government's focus should be.
I think that for a lot of schools, they would have preferred to be finding out how they can access more learning support for students or professional development for teachers. Because this announcement is potentially addressing a problem that doesn't really exist.
I'm really concerned that we're forcing schools down one track to say that this is what has to happen, this is what you have to use, and then I'm really concerned about what will happen with that information.
Back at school, the Minister was teaching students how to deal with the press.
The key is don't look at the camera, just be cool.
Unfortunately, it was not achieved.
So there you go. There's the story from One News. Look, no real questions to start with. Mark, why don't you just give us your feedback to the story we've just seen?
Well, what we're looking at is yet another statement that really is adding nothing to repertoire of what schools need to be able to address the learning of children. Certainly the most important thing that does occur is the conversation between the parent and a teacher about what a child needs.
Right.
And schools, as they point out, 90% of schools are already using these assessment tools. So it begs the question, why do they think this is going to be a significant change to what's happening with achievement in our country?
Yeah. Okay. Well, why do you think then? Like, just to go kind of full picture on the political side of this, we've had, before he passed away, we had Chester Burrows on talking about gang patches, because that was something under his national government that they tried to do. And he said bluntly, it's a great bumper sticker. It's not very good legislation. Is this something that's a good bumper sticker? In other words, it sounds good, the politicians saying it, but really schools are already doing it, and it's just kind of amplifying something that they're already doing for the sake of being able to say, hey, look what we're doing. Do you know what I mean?
I think you're quite correct there, Pat, because we have had, and we've had elements where we talk about soundbite policy divisions and so on. Bumper sticker is a good way that Chester's put that. It sounds great. People think, oh, that sounds firm. But in actual fact, it's not making a significant difference. It's when schools are already assessing children. It's in the assessments that I've talked about there, they are designed already for teachers to look at and analyse to figure out what does a child actually need. There's a lot more work in it than just taking a score and saying, right, this kid should be in the giraffes and that one's in the dolphins sort of thing. It needs careful analysis. Teachers are already doing it. Schools are already doing it. What schools and teachers have been saying very consistently for quite a few years now is the game changer is that we need more support with the learning of children. We need more specialists.
Yeah.
We need more people in the classrooms themselves. And we need more time for the teachers to prepare and do all the design for the learning for each child. None of that has been forthcoming. So we keep waiting to hear this great leap forward in these kinds of areas, but it never happens.
I know this has just been released sort of this afternoon. So these ideas, as the government's putting it in there, are fairly new, not new ideas, but new that they've announced it. Have you got a bit of a feedback from teachers or anything yet? Have you heard from any of the people in the classroom on the coalface as to what they think about this?
Well, most of the feedback we've heard so far is, so what? What is this going to change for us? We've heard some say that they've already been making decisions about reducing the amount of assessment required in order to be able to do actual teaching with children. And they're worried that this is just the start of more mandated state-driven decisions that should be made by people in the classrooms, not by politicians.
Right. So we've been talking about, I know we're exaggerating here, but talking about this current government, national government, feeling like it wants to go back to school of the 1950s. Does this have the same kind of vibe about it?
Well, it's very curious that this government's been talking about things such as they've had an advisory group that's talking about taking us back to cursive handwriting.
Yeah.
It's kind of, everything seems so retro because there's this nostalgic idea that we could just behave like we did back in the 50s and 60s and everything would be the same. The world is not the same as it was then. Our families and our children are not living in the same situations, circumstances that people enjoyed back then. And we've actually been making some good inroads into some of the parts of our community that honestly the 50s and 60s weren't kind to. And a lot of these measures look like they're going to roll back some of those improvements. And hey, that's not going to be productive for anybody.
Yeah, I've got several more questions, but Chewy, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'd be interested to see if you agree with me here. It really seems that they've made an announcement that says that they're rolling out something to 10% of schools that aren't already doing it. And it definitely seems like they are harkening back to the standardized tests and standardized achievement gateways that people might look back fondly on their own schooling, perhaps. But the schools that we have now aren't the schools that we had back then. We had smaller classes. We had more homogenized classes. We have more first-generation Kiwis here that are coming in. And I think they're asking teachers to do more with less for more students and more diverse students without any support. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, Chewie. The diversity that is now present in New Zealand schools is far greater than we had back in those nostalgia, and let's be honest, rose-tinted days, because don't forget, those days we had a secondary school system, for instance, deliberately designed to fail half the children in our country.
Yeah.
And now
the bell curve, eh? The bell curve.
Yeah, the bell curve.
Yep.
And it was an artificial one that they created. And now we're actually expecting teachers to ensure at least 80% of children pass. So that's a real about face from those days. But again, 80% is just the bell curve still. And anyone who understands stats knows that nothing in human nature escapes the bell curve. All you can do is artificially change the bell curve, such as some countries where they artificially alter their population so that the maybe a lot of the lower paid income people in the country, their children don't actually even go into the country. They stay elsewhere and they just bring in that kind of workforce. You start to artificially alter your population. And so it makes you look better than maybe your neighbour who doesn't do that. So that bell curve is... have you ever noticed everyone saying, 1 in 5 this, 1 in 5 that? Well, that's just 80%.
Yeah.
So, we have to stop trying to thrash the teachers to get them to do something that they're not going to be able to beat. But you're quite right, Chewie. It comes back to what is actually happening in the classrooms. And Jodie, in that TV1 News article, she says every other country where they have mandated and driven into this particular area has not had any significant change or increase in the achievement that they're chasing. And that's because they're actually aiming for and going after the wrong things.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Chewie, you actually did a piece on this, so you correct me as well, but there was some announcement that they were going to do away with something like reading recovery, that the government was going to get rid of something to do with some help. Because what I noticed in there was Erica was saying that they want to be able to identify the kids that need a, quote, little bit more help, end quote. If they're, on one hand, getting rid of some of these things that are going to give these kids a little bit more help, once they've been identified through this new system of 1950s schooling, what is the help that's going to be left funded in these schools to actually give them?
And that's a very good question. So, reading recovery is one area that it's been what was an international sensation when New Zealand developed it, and it was found to work, and it worked overseas. But it's been discredited in the last few years, particularly because it was seen as an expensive intervention. So rather than actually look at the fact that we need to find other interventions to support, you discredit the one that you've got. A lot of people are using what they call the science of reading to discredit it, but in actual fact, it's based on the science of reading too, the same science. So there are some really good ideas in what they're now calling structured literacy, but not all those ideas work for every child. And other schools also have alternative methods and programs that they use that use a lot of the same concepts structured literacy does. So again, we've got to start looking at what is the real game changer. And what we are seeing is no real significant difference in what's been put forward, and particularly, Chewie, your point about how many kids were in the classroom and what kind of things were children presenting with in the classroom. Those things are not being taken into account.
Yeah, that actually, you've just led right into the last question I'd already written down. If what you're saying is true, and this is what the teachers are feeling, that this is going to create no change, if you could actually get the government to do what would bring good change, what kind of things would you guys like to see implemented in the school, in the teacher's classroom, that actually would make some kind of change for the positive?
Well, one thing that we do know is that people are saying that they need more time and they need more support. Now, we don't have the workforce necessary to meet the needs of our growing population. We've got a diminishing number of people putting their hands up to train as teachers. So what we do need is a significant response from successive governments, not just one. We need a government plan that has a workforce that is trained, prepared, that gives enough teachers so that the teachers aren't getting stretched further and further because they're not getting enough support in the classrooms. We get enough specialists to get in there and help the teachers who are also carrying quite a diverse, complex number of needs in the classroom. And we have the right opportunities for them to get time to do the work. And I've just been at a conference recently in Singapore, and at least 25 different education jurisdictions all made the same point, that we have had for the last 20 odd years in all these countries heaped the expectation on teachers, but we haven't done anything to equip them with the time and the space they need to meet all those expectations.
Sure, you want to add anything else?
Yeah, look, I think I'm seeing this thought echoed a lot in the chat here that we've got scrolling by. And it just seems that teachers have been really consistent in what they need to improve outcomes for students. And that's either more help in the classroom or smaller class sizes.
Exactly.
Why is it that successive governments keep missing this? It seems pretty obvious.
Well, the solution is obvious, but the actual political will to do it doesn't seem to be forthcoming. And so we have government after government doesn't address the needs, and we've had too many governments bring in enforced cuts. We're just seeing it again in education. Education is not a rose bush. It doesn't flourish when you cut it. It will only reduce and be eroded again and again. So it's just when you erode something to a point, it gets to a point where governments start saying it's too hard. And that's where we're at in this country. They are throwing their hands up. They're not getting into the investment that they do need. In Singapore, 20% of their GDP goes into their education system. We aren't even half of that. So we need to actually figure out how as a country, what do we value? Is it the education of our children? Therefore, we must invest in that, not in more tax cuts for landlords and so on. So it's quite clear.
It's interesting you say, what do we value? And not this actually leads into another topic we're doing tonight, Mark, when we talk about a podcast from last night talking about the media industry. And the reason it's sparked something in my head is this kind of neoliberal idea of if something costs money or has a financial value to it, that's why it has value. But one of the questions that gets asked in this podcast is we value all sorts of things that don't have a commercial, capital entity to it. And I wonder if what we're seeing in this government is a little bit of that. They put value in the things that have a financial cost to them. And like cultural reports, we'll get rid of those. It doesn't matter. But, they're putting priority and valuing things that they can put a dollar sign in front of rather than maybe necessarily what's best for the individual or the area they're changing, because it may not have a dollar sign in front of it.
Well, yeah, you've got to look at what is happening in most governments, not just our own. They are very much geared towards helping those who already have privilege and wealth. Yeah. And so this doesn't actually go to helping a child who's in a community that has suffered for quite some time with that redistribution of the wealth within those communities to a few. I mean, this is demonstrable, it's seen, it is measured. So we need to really get the cost effectiveness is thrown out there as an excuse. There's a Kurt Vonnegut that said we may go down in history as the only people who chose not to save ourselves because it wasn't cost effective.
Very good. Hey, look, thanks so much for coming on tonight. And a huge thanks to Lisa for hooking this up for us as well. There's an NZEI conference on over the weekend in Invercargill. Are you attending it?
Yes, I am. Really looking forward to it. Te Kahui Whetū. It's one of our jewels of our conferences in the year. It's for Māori educators and for educators teaching Māori. And
there'll be a couple of no-name brain-dead podcasters down there on Monday afternoon talking on a panel. We've been invited to come down as well, so we're going to come down and look incredibly out of place amongst all you smart people.
Oh, no, I think you'll be well fitting in, guys. Well done.
Hey, all right, Mark, we might see you on Monday, but thank you very much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate the time.
Ka kite.
Cheers, Mark.
Wow, it was interesting. I just want to say one thing, not to ruin the vibe of what we're saying. TVNZ, if you think these outfits are kids, quote unquote, braving the cold, then you can get fucked, because this is Dunedin in summer. Look at this, short shorts and t-shirts. I know I've completely gone off track. This is, look, shorts and t-shirts, braving the cold. Sorry, Pat, I had to just say that one more time. Yes,
just to acknowledge something, Pat.
Yes.
You are from the north. Like kids down here, they'd be dressed the same because they're tough.
No,
we raise
4 degrees today, bro.
We raise them on pig hunting and eating Swedes for dinner. They're tough, skin like bark.
Let's get some of these chats out there. Thanks so much for being a part of this so far, guys. Campbell Kia ora koutou Tefano was absent the last 2 nights, so here's my money, says Campbell. Planner Walk says, working on a theme song, writing some new lyrics too, though it questions whether Chewie is wearing pants. Still trying to work in a particular reference. Yeah.
Do you want to know my secret?
Yes, please.
You want to know my secret?
You're in a sleeping bag.
It's a sleeping bag.
Oh, dude. See, look, you're not t-shirt and shorts. At least I've got shorts on. Can't get my leg up.
Hey, look.
See, I've got shorts on.
I didn't say I was tough.
Yeah, all
I
right,
said
fair enough.
Kids down here are tough.
Peter says, we had PATs in my day. Surely education has progressed since the 80s and 90s. Alex with a late fee, making Adobe tonight. Oh, Adobe. I've been doing editing all afternoon, can't you tell? Adobe tonight, highly recommended. Junk Rig says, Luxon wants a 90-day plan from all 5-year-olds for the first quarter of the new term by Friday. Very good. Tafiri is saying, thank you for the super chat, Junk Rig as well, and Tafiri. National to Labour are like the bully that picks on you but copies your homework when they're failing. Yeah, it does feel a bit like that, doesn't it? Rachel says it's a distraction. The Demolition Coalition, meanwhile ripping he whakaputanga and te tiriti context out of the curriculum. Very good. Not very good. I'm saying good point is what I meant. And they're rewriting. Kiwi Bird says...
Just to acknowledge that point, right? That is a very tactical move.
Yeah.
Part of the problem that they had with so many people pushing back against their anti-te tiriti angles that they're playing on so many pieces of legislation is that people these days are hitting voting age with a much better understanding.
Yeah, true.
Of the history of New Zealand and what has been done. Now, if they can take this away from another generation, then they're going to get less pushback next time they try something.
Yep. What else we got here? Lauren McNichols. I'm going to push. Why didn't Lauren McNichols come up? Oh, I might have just deleted Lauren McNichols, Chewy. If we can find that, maybe we put it up. Push the wrong button.
Oh, okay.
Lorraine Taylor, the principal of Silverstream School in Upper Hutt, was on the Ministerial Advisory Group and is in Erica and CLM's pocket. They have done more than one announcement there, Chewy. Yeah, I actually wondered that because they found the one principal that's going, you know what? National stewing's great. It's going to help everybody out. And I did kind of go, you have that bullshit nerve at the back of you. I'm like, no, is this a plant?
She seemed pretty glowing.
Yeah, it's a plant, maybe. Very short. TAs, teachers' assistants in every class for years 1 to 8 would be a good start. And training those TAs. Yep, there we go. We've done the distraction one, haven't we? We will say, Mike says, bang on, Chewy. I can see why you highlighted this one, Chewy. Bang on, Chewy. Primary school in the Hut, 20% don't speak much English. Class size of 28 for one teacher. It's just insane. I guess it depends what age. Like if that was new entrance, 28 feels too big. If that was, intermediate school, not so much. So, but yeah, I'm both primary school. I hear you. Kiwi Bird, like me, I guess. I was taught how to write in cursive in the 90s. I don't write that way because people struggle to read it. I write in print these days. I use kind of a bastardized version of them both. Sometimes the letters join and sometimes they're printed. So I saw someone the other day trying to justify it's funny when people come out of the woodwork to defend the indefensible. Like someone on my Twitter feed today, because we put up that clip that we talked about Seymour last night, and he said, and they said, is there any proof that he was Snapchatting, or is this just another one of beat up David Seymour day? And so someone then just put up the clip from us. That was the clip that just went up. Yeah,
it was literally pictures of it.
Yeah,
and multiple independent people.
Yeah.
Coming out and saying, yes, this is a known thing. And look, those rumors have been bubbling away for a while, but this is the first time that there's been enough push and enough evidence to actually talk about it on the news.
I heard from someone through Twitter, made a very interesting point. They said that they were a teenager in that era, 2016, whatever it was, and Snapchat was new. And it was kind of a bit like TikTok and stuff now. And the point they were making was one of grace for David Seymour. as we've heard, and it's been very, very clear, and including being made by the people, the young people who have been speaking, that nothing untoward was ever in any of these messages. But perhaps the person was saying on my feed, the 2024 Snapchat that we think of and go, oh, is very different from the 2016 Snapchat. And so, I will just still stick with it's a bit fucking weird, and that's where I'm going to leave it. I know other people think other things, but I'm leaving it with it's just a bit weird. Ruru says lower teacher-student ratios are needed to improve achievement. Jeremy says, is it a late fee if I purposely listen to the pod? You'll have to check with Kooky Nick about the rules around late fees.
He's the one that came up with that.
We don't know.
We're the beneficiaries. We're not the enforcement agency.
Here's one other one from Campbell. Very generous super chat. Thank you for that, Campbell. Bit off topic, but saw a Plunkett giving Paddy Gower stick on the platform, even mocking his unemployed status, just like last night tearing down the vulnerable. Well, firstly, I mean, I actually messaged a few people today trying to get Paddy's contact details. I wouldn't call Paddy vulnerable just yet. I'm sure he's okay at the time being, but here, someone down on their luck. I hear what you're saying. The funniest, I actually saw that interview as well, Chewy, because as you know, I do doom scroll, and then because of that, I get some hideous things come up on my feeds. I watched that as well. And the thing that I found funniest after our conversation last night on both Plunkett and Duncan Garner confirming that the platform's losing money, him talking about how these mainstream media companies are losing money. And I was like, maybe that's why he took the tweet down asking for people to sign up to the app. Because it's pretty clear that, yes, he's right, they're losing money, but so are you. But the only reason you're still here is you've got a backer who at the moment is prepared to eat those losses. Because if this was a commercial entity and you had to start it for yourself, you would have been gone a long time ago. Just because Daddy Warbucks came along and gave you a stash of cash to enable you to eat those losses, maybe it's a bit of pot kettle black here, sunshine. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. So yeah, and look, I mean, we're not going to highlight that tonight. And it's not really worth doing, but I did see that yes to answer your question. Sorry, Chewy, you were going to say?
I was going to say I struggled to find it now. Like, if you were to weigh up the careers of Paddy Gower and Oliver,
yeah,
who's added more value to the discourse in this country?
Maybe what we should do is go into the working group thing, because one of the things that they say in the working group is they talk about, and Willie Jackson's on it from last night, they talk about public funding, and they talk about places like News Talk ZB, and that started with public funding, and that's why they're still here today. And I just thought when I was listening to that, I'm like, I thought, because, as people keep telling me on my TikTok, I am Plunkett's #1 fan, obviously, is that it's the same as him. He got his start and he got his profile through public funding.
Isn't it amazing?
RNZ and Fair Go.
All of these people that have got massive legs up from the state.
Yeah.
State funding, taxpayer-funded entities, taxpayer-funded education, all of this sort of stuff, build them into the people that they are. And then they're like, I'll take it all away. I got there by sheer bloody mindedness and grit and pluck and all of that sort of stuff. I didn't need any of this in my day. I didn't need all of this fucking help.
Yeah.
Mate, you work for a state broadcaster for decades.
Yep.
You've been on the public tit the entire time, and now you're on the private tit.
Well,
but you're still on the tit.
Yeah, but just remember the private tit that he's on gets $300 million a year of public money as well. So the Wright Family Foundation build their wealth and get their wealth through public funding. So yeah, okay, the Wright Family Foundation can wash your money, Mr. Plunkett, but it still ultimately can be traced back to the government. You know what I'm saying?
Would you say it's the public tit twice removed?
I don't know. I just got this imagery and this something about melting pancake batter sucking on a tit. I don't want to go there. We're not going to go there.
It'll be a stunt tit.
Someone talked about, and I've lost it already, News Talk ZB having lots of ads. I think when it was 1ZB, 2ZB, 3ZB, 4ZB, it used to be I'm pretty sure ZB used to be the NZBC, and that's when it had public funding, and then it moved into a commercial entity. So yes, it's a commercial entity now, but it wasn't at the start. So in other words, this monolith that's got, huge power and huge reach now would not exist, much like Sean Plunkett's profile would not exist without public funding. But they pulled the ladder up. All right, let's do this though. Let's just keep trucking with this conversation. Let's have a look at part of the chat last night. It was a good one, actually. It was a good show. Max Harris and Willie Jackson and 2 regulars were there as well. And they were talking a bit at the start about, actually Willie Jackson has a good crack at Damien Grant, takes him to task. There's a very interesting, I don't know if I've jotted this down. I don't know whether he says it in this thing, but one of the interesting points that was made is a lot of media now have truth behind paywalls and sensationalism in front. And I thought that's really fucking interesting.
Yes.
That is really interesting. If you look at the News Talk ZB commentary and stuff, I not News Talk ZB, sorry. I meant to say NZME and the Herald. I pay for the Herald for the premiere stuff. And I kind of go, oh, because that's the stuff that doesn't need the sensational headline because people are paying for it. You're not going to get anyone else clicking on it. And it's just a very, very interesting perspective. Anywho, let's get into this first clip. I'm just going to say Willie Jackson has a good crack, mate. It's pretty good, actually.
But it is exactly state coercion. If the state is saying we want to fund the media,
states always funded the media.
Then go and do it, right? If you want to take taxpayers' money to give it to the spin-off, then by all means do it and do it explicitly. But why?
Let me just say one thing before I let Willie come in on this. I mean, one way of
before I let Willie tear him a new one.
Thinking about this is these media networks are using an input which is local journalism, local research, local work that they're not paying for. And
while taking the advertising revenue as well.
This is something that you should support, Damien. This is just about putting a
property
proper
rights.
price,
It's property rights.
putting a proper price on an input.
Willie, the government finally got around to agreeing to your digital bill, much to Damien's disgust, that will force the big tech czars to pay for the news content they are taking. Has the government timed this in the week News Hub goes under so they don't look completely useless?
I think it's a bit of that. No doubt about it. They've done absolutely nothing in the broadcasting and media area. We heard Melissa Lee, one of Damien's heroes.
Hold on, I object to that.
It was all a big shakedown, according to her.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know what planet you're on, Damien. All your life, the state has been funding media. All your life. 1ZB, somebody remind Mike Hoskins.
There you go.
He's the beneficiary of a state-funded channel. These guys talk like we never ever funded the media. ZB was set up on state funding. National Radio set up on state funding.
Awful.
But these guys talk, why are they doing it? We're doing it because New Zealanders believe in a public media.
Willie, I want to pull you up on
you
that.
can't pull me up because you do not know your history or you've forgotten it or you've got amnesia. There's something wrong with you, Damien. I don't know what's wrong with you. Let me finish. What a great day, you know. I was looking at the Damiens and all these crazy right wingers. They're so broken over it, you know, because Goldie's actually got a bit of decency, you know.
A little bit.
Not
much.
There's a bit of
just enough.
No, and a bit of common sense here.
Yes.
Because here's the thing, Damien. The industry don't care what you say. 95% of the industry want this because these mongrels have been stealing news and not paying for it. They make $1 billion, I think it's about $1 billion a year that's going out of the country.
Why should Facebook make money off you, Damien, not pay you?
$1 billion, Damien.
All right.
There you go. There's the first part there. Get him, Willie. Go get him. Why don't you get him, Willie? Have a crack. And obviously, I mean, you guys are aware of this, but they're talking about what we talked about last night, and Google and Facebook scraping information off other websites and putting it on their own thing and not paying it for it. So the reporter at News Talk ZB does the work, gets paid for the 7 hours of work, writes the article, you know, and then ZB puts it on their website, and then Google scrapes it, and then you never have to go to the ZB website, which means ZB has paid for everything to be done, and Google takes all the money from the advertising. So that's a part of what they're talking about. Joey, go for it, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the fact that Willie is just pointing out that for the majority of media in New Zealand, it has been a state-funded entity.
Yeah,
like the assets and the institutional knowledge all came out of NZBC. we all look back at like archives is full of state-owned content from the NZBC. Even when they were privatized and sold off, we're still getting the benefits of it.
Yeah.
And the reason that the state is involved in these entities is because they need and they benefit from the public being informed. And I don't think, like, we might all make jokes about, the lefty media, or the media has a bias towards the right. But we chop and change depending on whether we like the story. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And that's how it should be. If these organizations have less reporters, then they're trying to do more things and they're spending less time chasing down a story. And it could be one that brings down a government. Or the fact that these guys could be scared of being the centerpiece of a story that brings down a government keeps the fuckers honest. How many times has someone been caught by the media? Can we really afford to have less people doing good work? Like in the last couple of weeks, Paula Penfold's amazing story about Chinese interference in New Zealand political process. Do we not need that? Do we need our media organizations to resort to clickbait?
Yeah.
To keep
in front
the doors
in front of the
open?
paywall. Clickbait in front of the paywall, truth behind.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in a country as small as New Zealand, we just don't have the advertising base to support the amount of media that we are used to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would Damien Grant be happy that there's one media outlet, they have a fucking monopoly, it's the only way that they can make money, but it's all one person's point of view?
Well, he wouldn't have a problem if it was the right person, and obviously he'd have a huge problem if it was the wrong person. This actual conversation goes straight into that. Like, this is you've introduced without knowing it the next part of the conversation, which goes along the lines of, why don't people just pay for it? So let's just jump into that part of the conversation. It's only a minute, just over a minute. We'll have a listen to what they've got to say.
So let's just pull that apart. My first question is, if New Zealanders believe in this sort of journalism, why won't they pay for it?
What do you mean?
If people valued this sort of journalism,
this is coming back to what I just said in that last interview. It's like, and this, I'm not trying to preempt the conversation, but he can only see value in things that have a financial worth. That's all he sees value in.
Why? Let Willie answer the question. If people value it, why aren't more people subscribing to ZB Plus and NZME?
Well, they have their subscribers, but New Zealanders believe, I believe a fair amount, a great majority of New Zealanders, probably in the older bracket, 35, 40 plus, they believe in strong public media. And they also believe in a free, it's not all about pay. People want to access things, because as of right, they've been taxpayers all their lives. They should be able to access free things.
If I could just jump in, there's plenty of things that New Zealanders value that we don't pay for. Like we use parks, we use the environment. And the problem with your way of seeing the world is it doesn't value something that doesn't have a price on it.
It's all commercial and dollars for you, Damien. You're a sad man. I'm worried about you.
That's sweet, Willie, and a little bit concerning. But let's talk about.
So it's a really interesting point. I'd never heard it before. Max said that, and we saw you, Frosty, in there. Just to be aware, we saw it.
Great comment.
It was, and I know it's a bit of a tangent to say parks and the environment and stuff, but it's true. It seems to be. What we're finding at the moment from a sector of society is, if I can't put a dollar sign in front of it, it has no value. And I would also say, when Damien Grant goes, why won't they pay for it? And I'll tell you the answer to that, Joy, and it's that we can't afford to. A part of this conversation, and I don't know if it's still on the one clip I've got to come or if I cut it out, Willie Jackson makes a very good point about the size of the country versus the denseness of the population. What we have to do to cover the breadth and width of the country, like for example, being able to report from those areas, can never be sustainable because we don't have the population base to pay for it. It's as simple as that. That's why we need a public broadcaster. And that's why in the announcement made by the government over the weekend, yesterday, which I will still applaud, is them saying that local TV channels are going to be able to get access to the funding that's till this point has only been available to movie companies. Great. Because the way we have New Zealand content, and I've told you the story before, probably, Joey. When I was working overnights on ZB, smallest, most, ugliest bloody on the totem pole down the bottom, carrying everyone's shit. Per capita, I had a bigger audience than Bill O'Reilly, who was the number one host in cable news. So per capita, we had more. So I had more people per 1,000 than he had listening to me. That means I had about 100,000 people and he had 3 million. And actually, those numbers may not be quite right, but whatever they were. But what it meant was because the population size wasn't big enough, even though I had more listeners per 100,000 than he had viewers per 100,000, it actually worked out that that there was no money to be made off that. That was just a service that the radio stations provided to keep their talkback going overnight and going live. We don't have the population to support massive amounts of media. We just don't. So why won't they pay for it? And the answer is simple, because New Zealand can't afford to pay for it. Then we come back to what you just said, Chewy. Do we therefore just have one public broadcaster with one voice? Or does the government go, we need a mix of voices. We need variety. In our small country, we need some of the smaller groups within that country represented in media. So we will provide an aspect of funding that people can apply for. So it's as simple as that. Your whatever minority group has got now a show on public access or on a local radio station or starting up something that may require funding because they don't have the wherefore or they don't have the audience to reach. And I continually say that just because something doesn't necessarily turn a profit doesn't mean it's not valuable, doesn't mean it should not be heard in this country, right? Whether it's a disability program on TVNZ on Sunday morning, whether it's an Asian radio show on local radio somewhere in the country, whether it's Māori radio, just because it won't turn a commercial return doesn't mean we don't need that representation. We don't need to hear their stories and their voices. We do need to hear them. We're a multicultural country. That's why we provide public funding for some of these things, Dewey.
There's a reason over the last couple of years that have absolutely sung the praises of Māori TV around their Anzac Day coverage.
Yeah.
As someone that has been so immersed in World War II history for over half his life, they're the only ones telling me new stories.
Yeah.
They're the only ones telling me things that I haven't heard before about Anzac Day and World War II and the people that went away to fight for this country. And that keeps bringing me back to Māori TV isn't profitable. TV as a whole isn't profitable. It's enormously expensive. But these guys are great at counting the cost, but not knowing the value.
Yeah, very good.
And as much as I can be disparaging as fuck about Shortland Street, but how many people involved in our film and television industry, of which we're enormously proud, got their start on Shortland Street or paid their bills and were able to continue practicing their craft on something like Shortland Street. I know many comedians. You can't be a comedian. You can't be an entertainer and pay all your bills. So along comes something like 7 Days.
Yep.
That has a writing room full of comedians and has comedians as hosts and that sort of thing. And that keeps that industry ticking over. And then you look at how many New Zealand bands got New Zealand on air funding. Someone like Damien Grant would go, bands should be able to stand on their own 2 feet. They should be able to exist on whatever they make by playing down at the pub. Or he somehow thinks that bands can tour in this country and make money. It is a fallacy, and at that point you need to go and say, okay, arts and culture in this country, is it just a commercial operation? No,
Yeah.
It is not, but it has a value far in excess of its door sales.
Yeah.
And we're enormously proud. We're super proud when something like Whale Rider blows up, or Flight of the Conchords is selling out arenas. Now remember, we shat on Flight of the Conchords to the point where they went overseas.
Yeah,
we didn't want that program. There wasn't the funding for it. You know, it's mental. We're happy when a New Zealand product breaks overseas. We don't want to help them do it. Damien Grant thinks that they don't need any help. It's bullshit. It's survivor's bias.
You're talking about not being able to, a band can't tour. Yeah, I agree with you, but I just go like this. Like for every 660, there is 10,000 bands that can't make it. For every Lord, there's literally 5 million, because she's the only one to do what she's done, that can't make it. And as you were talking, Chewie, I just stopped and thought, imagine the world that Damien Grant is advocating for. Close your eyes and imagine if the only media we saw, heard and read had to wash its face financially, what would there be? And the answer is there wouldn't be very many minority stories told. There wouldn't be, and that's not, when I say minority, and I constantly remind people of this, I'm not talking about ethnicity, disability, minority. If you are in a small sector of the country, the retired people, although they may be a majority in the future, but just imagine that world though. What would it sound like? It's a bleak thought. I mean, he mentions places like, the business, NBR, is it right? NBR, the business thing, being out, and because it's business and they have a niche audience and they're able to do it. Great. That's the model. Imagine what else there'd be. I just think it's shocking to think of what it could be.
Whenever someone like Damien Grant tries to imagine a world, it's terrifying to me. I think his vision of the world is just every second building is a Wilson's car park, just slab, tilt slab, multi-layered car parks that are monetized to the hilt and run by a predatory company, is his waking wet dream. And we'd all be reading a Murdoch run, like the one website that we can access is a Rupert Murdoch run website, as we have our lunch in a Wilson's car park.
Yeah. Yep.
And the Wilson's car park doesn't, it just has stairs because there's no people in wheelchairs in Damien Grant's world.
I just feel like we've said Damien Grant's name so many times now. If we say it one more time, he may appear. So maybe we'll try and avoid that. And we'll go to the last clip, which is just a minute. And it's basically, the question is getting asked, is Winstons' big lie, right? And that's about, the Public Interest Journalism Fund. Is that the main reason why people distrust the media today? That's the question that's about to be asked.
Follow-up question, Willie. Willie. Winston's big lie is that the Public Journalism Fund was a giant bribe and that the entire media were bribed, when really he's referring to a New Zealand on-air funding note that set out their expectations of what applying for Māori media funding was. That funding note was quickly clarified by New Zealand on air that it wasn't an editorial declaration. How much blame should Winston take for plummeting trust in New Zealand media when he's purposely deceitful with his bribe claim?
Yes, no, he should take a lot of blame. And look, let's be clear about this. We've probably had overzealous officials in terms of NZ
But it was
on
a
air.
funding note. It was a funding note that was quickly clarified.
I've talked to Mark. What's Mark's name? Jennings.
Yep.
About it. He said they had to talk about. There was the request about the treaty.
Yep.
They just put. It was no big deal, but they were just wanting to go down that track. It was not a final and absolute.
No, it wasn't an editorial decision, was it?
Yeah, but the right
have conflated it to some great big bribery.
Damien's brought his son in here, which is he's a good little man, but I don't know if I like that, Damien. Now I might not go so hard on you if you brought him into. Hey, what's the story here,
It's another story. Don't worry, it's coming.
That comes up later on. So there you go. It was just an interesting point to go, because the distrust in the media has dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped, And you definitely saw a shift in society for all sorts of distrust reasons, sort of COVID onwards. That was at its highest point probably at the protest, and that has changed things. Whereas, as was said there and as we've said before, media's always been funded. They called it the Public Interest Journalism Fund at that point, but there's always been funding from New Zealand On Air for special projects, radio and television. And Winston has he has to take a fair amount of the blame for it. Chewy?
Yeah. I find that funny, terrifying. We never really saw the type of criticism that the media got up until COVID. And I think that's been massively amplified by people that want to take advantage of it.
And Trump started it. Look at those guys in the back row. The dishonest, fake news. Fake news is what started it. Really did.
News. This is another reason we've got to stop Trump, because that man has done damage to the political discourse of the entire planet. In my view, you are fake news. Okay, you're fake news. Yeah. I mean, look, there was some potentially valid criticism about what Labour were doing about merging Radio New Zealand and TVNZ, but my God, what it could have been.
I don't actually really agree. I don't think there was a lot of criticism that were fair. I think it was, if they had turned it into the BBC, it would have gone for the next 100 years, no problems at all. Yes, there would have been some cutbacks and stuff. I guess the only criticisms would have been some people would have lost their jobs because you didn't need to have two newsrooms in Auckland. You could have merged it and, you could have had a cheaper newsroom with 50% more people.
Yeah. Just some of the content, or a lot of the content that Radio New Zealand puts out. I would say, as someone that at this moment in time very rarely watches broadcast TV. Mm-hmm. Radio New Zealand on a TV would be something that I would be interested in.
Yeah.
But we're not going to get that because that was spun out of this whole thing of the government trying to control all the media. No, they were trying to keep the media fucking alive.
Yeah. All right. A few of the chats that have been coming in. Please try and get Steve Keen as a guest. I bet he'd have a lot to say about Seymour's economics and what's been going on with this government. Okay. I'm not entirely sure who Steve Keen is, but I will do some investigating. And thank you for the super chat, Candid Cat. David, thank you very much. Very generous super chat there. $10 for the Beardy Men and $10 towards the ethical theme song fund. And I also heard Seymour is the worst person. Thank you very much. $20, very generous. Kiwi Skirt, the pictures are not showing on BHN shop, only the prices. Not sure that'll work well, Pat. That's because Kiwi Skirt, we do drops that last 2 weeks, and that's it. So the only time we're selling things is in those drops.
It's a mystery bag. Just buy something and see what we send you.
We're not selling anything on the thing at the moment. Kiwi.
We're selling blank T-shirts and blank hoodies for an excellent price.
So what we do for people seeing the questions being asked is every month we do between 1 and 2 weeks where we drop merch, and that's the only time the shop is actually active. And because the merch, speaking of actually, the merch will be packaged up in the next day or so. The worst case scenario, if you're owed one, it'll be on the couriers on Monday morning, possibly Friday, hopefully Friday. Worst case scenario, just so you know. Mr. Arvid's $15, thank you for that. Damien is willfully ignorant. Individualism doesn't work. The few can subsidise the many. Everyone benefits from quality journalism and everyone should subsidise it. And then Campbell,
I love it. Every time someone says socialism doesn't work, I just want to go, hospitals, publicly funded hospitals would like to enter the chat.
Libraries.
I am quite happy to pay taxes my entire working life on the off chance that I will need a hospital, but
Fire
also
stations.
Because people
Schools.
are less fortunate than myself might need to use that hospital more. I'm happy to contribute. As you said, fire, police, roads, all socialist projects, schools.
Campbell says, obviously when I say close your eyes and think of that, think of this world that Damien Grant wants. Campbell says, I closed my eyes and I couldn't see. Fair enough. Okie dokie. Is there anything else in the chat or anything you want to get to before we move on?
No, I think you. Oh, okay. Cliff. We are watching the new TV right now, Whānau.
Oh, bless. There you go. Probably
Revolution to the barricades.
Okay, guys, this Kainga Ora story is really interesting. It does feel a little bit like we've talked before about how what the right does is they criticize the government and they say government doesn't work. And then they get in government and they pass policy that breaks the government. And then they step back and they say, see, told you it didn't work. This Kainga, remember, this guy, these have been saying, this government's been criticising the last lot for not building houses and the promises they made and this, that, and the other thing. And they get in and they make an order to stop building houses. And it's just a bizarre time. And there's a really interesting interaction, which I'll play to you from an RNZ story from yesterday, where the chair also, oh, there we go. The chair also disagrees with the Prime Minister, but doesn't realise he's disagreeing with the Prime Minister. It's very, very funny, actually. Do you want to read that out? I can't really see the words, people who are listening on the audio podcast.
Okay, so it's a little graph of a dominoes game. First domino, reduce the budget of public services. Then further along, elimination of positions in public services because their budgets have been reduced. Then complain about the decline in quality and efficiency of public services.
There you go.
Then claim that the degradation of public services is proof of government inefficiency, and so privatization is now needed. And then the last domino to fall, which coincidentally squashes the person, is to privatize. So this is the cycle that we must always be aware of when the right wing comes to power.
So the third one in, that's probably where we're at right now, whatever that third one was. What's the third one?
Complain about the decline in quality and efficiency of public service.
And this is where the new chief executive, or whatever his name is, of the board disagrees with the Prime Minister, but doesn't realise he's disagreeing. It's quite funny, but let's get the story first of all, and then we'll go to that audio.
Tēnā tātou katoa, good evening. There's concern in the construction industry. Tradies will be forced out of business because of the government's revamp of Kainga Ora.
News Hub can reveal that construction of 3,000 consented homes is now under review, while a new board comes up with a plan to turn...
She forgot to do the air quotes. She forgot to, specifically under review, which means they're not going to do them.
Yeah, they got 3,000 homes.
Well, the last section, the last term of the Labor government, they built 12,000 homes, yeah? There are 4,000 set to go for this year. That's their 16,000 target, right? Yet this government is cancelling this year's builds. Have a listen.
Around the state housing provider. As business correspondent Simon Shepherd reports, that plan isn't due until November.
And guess what happens when they cancel building of houses? Guess who loses out, Chewy? You know all those ute drivers that rather than carrying a sheep, they carry a hammer and a saw? All those friends of the national government who got their ute tax, given back to them, they all get screwed over when this government cancels all those houses being built.
All of those people that went through Labor's apprenticeship program.
Yep.
Just in time for them to go into the workforce, their work dries up and they go to Australia.
Yep, but a lot of them would have voted for this lot to get their ute tax put back in the too hard shelf.
It's the biggest home builder in New Zealand. Right now, Kainga Ora has work underway on almost 5,300 homes. But it's what happens next that has the construction industry worried.
We're not getting enough clear signals from the government about when that's going to change and pick up, and we're going to see a lot more construction companies at risk of going to the wall if they can't get the work that they've been getting over the last few years.
That's because Kainga Ora itself is being renovated. A review led by Sir Bill English said the board should be refreshed and a turnaround plan put...
Again, my exact words. It's hard when you're doing a voiceover to do the air quotes, but that we should always think about that as the review, 100%.
...in place. As a result, News Hub can reveal thousands of consented homes are in limbo. As at the end of May, 833 consented homes due to be built by July next year are being reviewed to see whether they are value for money. Another 2,168 consented homes due to be built after July next year have been paused.
So 3,000 homes. And let me just tell you, this just makes it feel like the ferry conversation all over again. They're reviewing 833 to see if they're value for money. Do you think they're going to be cheaper in 2, 3 or 4 years? Do you think that building yesterday is the best value you're going to get for building a house? So it's just all excuses. It's all making noise. It's all excuses. We know where they're going. We know.
That means no contracts being signed on 3,000 homes. A blow when the construction industry is already reeling from the recession.
In some ways, the indecision or the pause at Kainga Ora is actually contributing to the recessionary effect on the construction sector.
Housing Minister Chris Bishop has indicated private community housing providers could play a greater role, allocating $140 million in this year's budget. And in the last 6 years, that sector has built 2,000 homes.
We're match fit, we're good to go, and I feel confident.
So look, these guys are great. These community service providers, they're great. No criticism. I mean, it's Salvation Army, those for supplying houses. But what this means is the government is going to give these guys money, who are then going to build houses, who then these community groups will own those houses, rather than getting the government to build the houses, to then have an asset on your book, government, to have a government and our, all of our assets be worth more as a country. It just doesn't make any sense. Remember, they've been complaining about the $10 billion worth of debt that Kainga Ora, came up with in the last section. Well, yeah, but for that, they got $25 billion worth of houses. 10 million, wasn't it? I'm lost with my words now. And what it means is now we're going to give the money to someone else, and their charity, or their, I don't want to criticize them, but they're going to be the ones that get that asset on their ledger books, not us, not the citizens. So it doesn't seem to make any sense as to why they think the community groups should be doing it and not Kainga Ora. So the community groups will do it, then Kainga Ora will pay the community groups to house the people, rather than it being their own house which they're housing them in. Just why? It makes no logical sense at all. Other than government shouldn't be building buildings. That's about it. That's about as deep as you can go on.
Yeah.
But no deeper, because it makes no sense.
They can see the cost. They don't see the value.
Yeah, that's a very good thing, Joey. That must be a t-shirt.
They build the houses. They give them to someone else. They'll palm off those responsibilities to those organisations, and then they'll say that they don't need those people in Kainga Ora.
Yeah.
I guarantee the next fucking thing on the chopping block, Pat, I would bet the farm on this: accommodation supplements. Now that'll put the cat amongst the pigeons, because there's a lot of private landlords that like to make their profit sheets look nice and fat and charge full market rent for absolute rat holes, because they know that the tenants that are being sent their way will get their rent that's topped up by the accommodation supplement. I think National's going to take a swing at that, and that's going to piss off the landlords.
All right, we'll keep going.
That we can deliver, particularly those 1,500 new places that were announced in the budget.
But with Kainga Ora having 80% share of the social housing market, any pause in building is a big problem.
For a couple of years now, residential construction consents and activity have been in a very, very steep decline. And we've been arguing with the ministers of housing that there is a role for the government to step in, because we're really worried how deep that decline is going to go.
The Ministry of Housing and Urban Development says Kainga Ora is due to put forward a priority plan soon.
So, Simon,
this is what they've got. I've got another clip from you that I'm going to play from TVNZ's story as well, because we're talking about what is the main thing a government should do, right? And I think is like the safety and security of its citizens. That would be the top thing. Keeping them safe, keeping them healthy, keeping them secure. That would be the number one thing. Let's have a look at what the instructions that the Bish is now giving to the new board of Kainga Ora. You ready?
The government today announced 6 new board members for Kainga Ora and gave them a letter of expectation.
Cut your costs, operate efficiently and effectively, and focus on your core functions of being a landlord for vulnerable people in need.
Cut your costs, operate efficiently. So at no point did the minister who is in charge of the sector looking after the most vulnerable people list as number one make sure your people are okay. That should be number one. Make sure these vulnerable people are safe and housed. His number one is cut your fucking costs. Number one priority when talking to a government agency dealing with the most vulnerable people in the country and trying to get them into housing. Cut your costs. Number one, Chewy.
Do you remember what I said last week about the role of government in tough times, in recession and depression?
Yeah.
That's when you open up the purse strings and go on an infrastructure fucking binge.
Yeah.
Build those houses.
Yeah, make those roads, get those ferries.
Because you're going to prop up the economy. You're going to make sure all of these builders and tradies have work coming through. Fantastic. They'll spend that money in the economy. They'll pay the GST. It's all fucking good. You know, and then yeah, as you said, the second thing is, okay, new board of Kainga Ora. Here's your thing. Every day you go to get your lunch, walk through the CBD. Are there still people living in doorways?
yeah, that's your job, to make sure there's none of those.
Is there still a tent city in the city oval? Cool. Keep building houses until they're gone.
Yeah.
That's my expectations.
Great. That's really good, Chewy.
Fucking get in there.
Yep, I'm voting for you. Are we all voting for him, Fano? Everyone voting for Chewy for... You can be dictator for one day. Dictator for one day. That's what Trump says. And you can be dictator for one day.
I'll fix everything.
Let me play you something else that's going to... Look, this is actually really serious, but I know it's going to cause you to have a bit of a giggle. But it's actually really serious. I think all the votes coming in. Can I be your first lady? Can that be me? No? Oh, no, that might get your wife grumpy. I know your wife's already grumpy about it. Yeah, no, I'll stop. So I want to play for you a conversation that Kainga Ora's new chief exec, the new chief of the board, if that's the right word, this guy here, chief exec. Oh, no, that's the executive board. He's the chair of the new board. He's just been put in a month ago. So he's appointed by this government. He has said a few things. I assume there would have been a phone call after this, but have a listen to what he had to say about how Kainga Ora is operating. See if you can know the difference between what the Luxon appointed chair says about Kainga Ora versus Kainga Ora as wants to be explained by Luxon.
In a moment, did you try to get him to stay? Do you think he's the right person to be leading Kainga Ora?
So that's the chief executive who retired.
I think it's always a kind to say when you've been in a role for 8 years, like Andrew has. He's done a very good job over that 8 years, made an enormous difference to the organisation. You know, this year, for example, Kainga Ora will deliver 4,000 new build houses.
That didn't age very well, did it? Kainga Ora will deliver 4,000 houses this year, he said.
Pretty amazing achievement. And
but it's amazing.
You know, he has a right to consider whether he's up for another round. And I think together we had to decide whether he's up for another round. And I need a leader in place who's fully committed to the new narrower dimensions of Kainga Ora. So we came to the conclusion that it was his time was ready to move on and go and do something new in his career.
Okay.
And you know, Kainga Ora will get a new leader.
You say that they've done an amazing job.
Yep.
The Prime Minister describes it as chronically underperforming. So who's right there?
Well, look, I'm not arguing with the Prime Minister on that. I'm just saying that actually there's, you know, the CEO has done a good job, and Kainga Ora, it is an incredible achievement to have built that many new homes in this market over the last year and many thousands the year prior as well. So,
with respect, that is arguing with the Prime Minister because you can't be chronically underperforming, excuse me, and also doing a great job. You're in there.
I've been in there for a month, and I've seen some good things, and I've seen some things that.
And as we speak, my butthole is puckered. Can we stop?
Need some work, and my job is to deliver a new plan for the organisation in November this year, and I'm putting together a new board to help me with that. And we're underway, and in November we'll clarify what we think the organisation should look like going forward, and we'll solve the issues that have been called out, particularly the financial sustainability of the business that is threatened by the growing amount of debt.
Sure.
So, the the chair of the board, the new chair of the board, Simon Mata, says that Kainga Ora is doing a fantastic job, a great job, a really impressive job. But we're being told by the Prime Minister that they're underachieving and they're not doing well. So who's telling the truth? Later on in that same show, they got to ask Mr. Luxon the same question based on the inconsistencies of answers.
Mr. Muta says that Kainga Ora has been doing an amazing job.
Well, I'm sure there's bits that they are doing well, but we're also very clear about what we want to see improved, and that is we've talked about that. We've put a review in there. By Sir Bill English, we've changed the chair and we've changed the board.
What he said was that they were doing an amazing job of building houses.
Yeah, well, they do. I mean, they support 75,000 families or people from memory in there, and they've got a $45 billion asset portfolio. So all I'm saying to you is we're very clear about what our expectations of KO are. The new chair is as well. He's going to do a great job and he'll build a great team there, which will do fantastic work. I'm
just wondering how those two things can be true. If they're doing an amazing job, someone who you respect says they're doing an amazing job, you say that they're chronically underperforming. So how do those things match up?
Well, I'm sure the people are doing an amazing job. They need to be clear on their strategy, and that's what we want to see as a new strategy that has a turnaround plan that deals with their...
The one question right now should have been, what's wrong with the current strategy? Expand that for us. What's wrong with the current strategy that the chair of the board says is giving amazing results?
Challenges, that deals with their asset management challenges, that deals with their involvement in consultation with the communities, and the things that we've talked about and highlighted in the review when we've appointed the new chair. So, we're very aligned on all of that. But let's be clear, there are great people doing great jobs across the whole of the public service. It's a question of making sure that actually the sum of all of that...
I've been shitting on them the entire time.
Outcomes for New Zealanders.
Well,
so there you go. So, someone didn't get the memo about you need to crap on Kainga Ora, please. We're going to crap on you? No, we're not going to crap on you. I wonder if that involved a bit of a phone call between the two gentlemen after Mr. Luxon got off the phone. How dare you undermine me? Probably not. I don't find him to be a very confronting person. I find him to be more a shout things out from the side and then run away. So I suspect that phone call probably didn't happen.
Now, look, I'll be very clear. And what I'd like to say to you is that Kainga Ora is both a dreadfully run, horrible money suck of an organisation that needs to be put up against the wall and shot, but simultaneously is full of good, hardworking people doing an excellent job. I think I've been very clear about this.
Let's get to some chat, shall we? That was great. There's actually another part in this conversation. I probably should have queued it up. She did quite well. She pushed him and she was like, but they're building their assets. She actually was the first person who I'd heard talked about it. Should I try and find it? I wonder if I can find it. Should we play a game of like Russian roulette and see if I can find it in like one hit?
It's primarily on
financial situation,
being a landlord and not building.
You need to turn on that investment. What's happened in the issues to KIs and also organisation.
I failed. People on the audio podcast are going to be going, what the hell's going on? Maybe I'll try and find it.
Oh, got it in one.
Put it on on Twitter or something. Campbell on the super chat. Thank you for the super chat. My brother is a tradie. Without this blow, work was already drying up due to so-called quote needed government spending discipline end quote. The entire family has his quote get out of jail free card end quote ready. Right. Thank you for the super chat. Very generous, Campbell. Jezza says can't have public monopolies, only private ones. Mr. Arvid says, Nationals say they don't like giving handouts. These are basically handouts without the benefits, e.g. assets, is what Mr. Arvid says. And Mata says, the Salvation Army look after a lot of people with mental health and drug addictions. I in for them. Getting people indoors. Look, that's why I'm not criticising the actual community groups you're talking about supplying housing for, but we're still going, if you're going to give the money to someone, what's the logic behind giving it to an entity to build their asset base rather than paying for it? We're paying for it anyway. We're going to pay to keep people in them. That would go on the taxpayers of New Zealand's ledger and make us collectively wealthier. So anyway, that was the only question. Yeah, so there you go. That's the show pretty much, Chewy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice one, bruv.
Anything else we want to get to in the chat before we head off for the night?
No, I think you covered on everything. Look, since you start Mondays by
Since you've been gone. Sorry.
Oh God, sorry, I didn't know that was one of your triggers. Since you had the weekends to talk about movies, I'm going to mention one right now that everyone should see. Godzilla minus
the new one,
-1, or the Japanese one
Oh.
is phenomenal. It is so fucking good. If you don't like subtitles, I believe there's a pretty good English dub, but I just watched it in the subtitles. It's
Always.
because I'm a weeb.
Always.
It's an amazing movie. It's well worth doing it. Watch. Very good.
If you've been watching for the whole show, you might have heard us talking to the president of the NZEI and talking about a conference next week. Chewy and I have been invited to go to Invercargill and sit on a panel that they're calling, and I think, Chewy, they're calling it because of what I'm wearing, actually. They're calling it the panel of buffers. And we are, I guess, going to be asked some questions. The questions are supposed to be coming through. And so Monday night, there won't be a live show because we'll be driving back from Invercargill. But I'm hoping, I'm not going to say who it is, but I'm hoping to have a pre-recorded conversation maybe this weekend and put it up. But if I don't, what we'll do is we'll make a best of for Monday night. And because me and Chewy are going down to Invercargill to do this buffers panel, we'll definitely include the Margaret Mutu conversation if it's a pre-recorded show, because it just makes sense explaining people why they're doing it again. And I haven't told you this yet, Chewy, I've spoken to the people down at the conference, and we'll either be able to get the audio and video or the audio of the panel, and then we'll upload it. So we might do like a Friday night episode which uploads the audio from the panel that we're going on for the NZEI. God knows what they asked us, Chewy. I think we're actually, to be honest, I think I figured it out. I think we're there to, just a bit of eye candy. That's what I think it is. I think it's eye candy. I really do.
Sexy.
So, yeah. All right, guys. Well, listen, we'll be back tomorrow night, though. Oh, tomorrow night. We've got a guest, Chewy. I haven't told you this yet either. You wouldn't guess in a million years if I told you who was coming on. And you stay afterwards, Chewy, and I'll tell you why. No, you'll never guess. I can even tell you. No, okay. Well, I'll give you 3 cracks. Ready? Was a minister under a national government. Was also in New Zealand First. And
what the fuck?
And loves what we do.
What?
Oh, okay, let's leave it. Let's not even guess.
None of
tomorrow
those
night.
things go together.
I know.
None of those things go together.
I know. Tomorrow night.
This is very confusing. My first guess was going to be Matthew Ridge to settle the score.
Good Lord. So we've got. I'm not going to tell you. You guys can guess away in the chat, and you can guess away with what we're doing. But we'll probably, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll find out tomorrow because I'll put it out there when we've got the show notes going up. But that will be something that we're doing tomorrow night.
Pick up the news, big Harry style, keeping it loose.
Remember, musicians, keep an eye on the Facebook page. Facebook page is just Big Hairy News, I think. We put up the details about you could possibly win yourself or earn yourself $500 by designing us a new theme tune that would go where this one is right now. And yep, just also remember very clearly, if 5, 3, 5, 8, 10 people put entries in, there's one winner. So you've got to be keen to have a bit of fun and do it anyway in case you don't end up having the money for your time. So competition though, $500. Good on you.
Cash money.
Cash money.
New Zealand dollars.
Feel the burn. I don't know why I said that.
Expose the truth and raise the bar.
We do love this, by the way. This is hilarious. This is a great song. No
If
complaints.
someone just wants to do a smooth jazz version of it, I'm okay. Or a ska version.
All right, team. That's us for tonight. Thank you for coming on board. I see a couple of people have signed up for Patreon while we have been broadcasting tonight. If you're interested in supporting more of what we do and get your name on the credits with this theme song and the new theme song, whenever that does come, patreon.com/Big Hairy News. That's it from me, Chewy.
All patrons will escape the purges when I come to power.
There you go.
Thanks, fam.
That's fine. We'll catch you next time. See you tomorrow night, 9 p.m. for our mystery guest live with us for you to chat to. Big Hairy News. Catch you tomorrow night at 9. Hooroo.
No nice.